I'm Beefy, and this is My Cougar Story. I had just moved to Pullman to start grad school here at WSU, and I was teaching an introductory biology lab, and it was my first real teaching experience outside of like some crappy substitute teaching jobs I did in between undergrad and grad school, and I was in my very first lab. We went to the Connor Museum here on campus, and it's the Natural History Museum, and so there's a bunch of like taxidermied animals and stuff in there, and they just had to go around looking at the specimens, like making observations about them. And so I was just walking around the museum, making sure everyone was doing what they were supposed to do, and I looked over, and that group of football players was all standing around this stuffed ram, and one of them was petting the ram, and they were trying to bet this one dude to touch the eyeball because they didn't know if it was real or not. And so, first of all, that is super absurd that they would think that a stuffed ram would have a real eyeball and it's not rotting out of its head, but that's besides the point. But so I had to like walk up to these dudes and tell them like, guys, we're in a museum right now. You can't be touching the specimens in a museum. And they kind of just like looked at me like I was weird. And I was like, no, it'd be like going to an art museum and touching a painting. Would you do that in an art museum? And then one of them just looked me right in the eyes and he said, homie, I never been to a museum. I'm from the hood. I see dead bodies every day. And I just kind of like paused because it's a super absurd escalation to touching or from going to a museum to seeing dead bodies every day. And so I like really didn't know what to say to this dude. And luckily one of his homies stood in and said, dog, you ain't from the hood, you're from Anaheim. And every one of his like friends around him just like laughed, and they just clowned on him hard, and they just walked away. But it was a pretty intense experience for my first lab ever taught here. I'm Beefy, and this is My Cougar Story.